You can draw this in Procreate. You can draw this blue house in Procreate, and I will guide you through every single step. You don't need any experience with drawing or with Procreate at all. Don't forget that once you have reached the end of the video, once you have followed the tutorial, that you can share your work online. If you share it on Instagram, then don't forget to tag me in the image, not just in the description. That way I will be able to find your work and perhaps we'll see it in the next video. We will be using free brushes only, brushes that are already in the Procreate app and brushes that you can get for free through freefromflow.com. There you won't just get a bunch of free brushes, but also my ebook about color theory. Before we get started, don't forget that if you are enjoying these You Can Draw This video tutorials, you can support this channel by leaving a comment, hitting that thumbs up, or subscribing to the channel, of course. And if you want to do more, and if you want to watch a lot more video tutorials, then you can join the community at Patreon. I have actually made an overview of a whole bunch of tutorials that you can find on Patreon on my website. But now let's get started with this tutorial. First of all, the canvas is 2300 pixels by 3000 pixels and the color profile is set to sRGB. If you want to use the same colors as I'm using during this tutorial, then you can download the color palette through the link in the description, and yes, that's totally free as well. The first thing we are going to do is change the color of the background. We'll do that by going to the layer menu and then clicking background color. And we will pick this light grayish bluish color. And now we'll go to the layer menu again and start on layer 1, and we are going to turn on the Symmetry Tool. You can use that by going to the wrench, then to Canvas, and then turn on Drawing Guide. And then click Edit Drawing Guide. Then pick the symmetry option here at the bottom and click done. Now when you go to the layer menu and you look at layer 1, you can see it's assisted, and that means that symmetry is turned on for this layer. We are going to start by drawing the blue house, and we will use the Monoline Brush for that. You can find it under calligraphy. And for the color, we are going to use this light blue color, the second color in the first row. Right now, the opacity of the brush is set to 100% and the size is at 30%. Now we are going to draw the underside of the house. We'll make a line and start about here at 2/3 of this side of the canvas. Hold your pen in place and tap one finger on the screen to make it snap to a perfectly horizontal line. Then we'll make a vertical line. We'll start here, go up with a wiggly line, but hold your pen in place to make it snap to a quick shape, and then hold one finger on the screen to make it snap to a perfectly vertical line. And then we'll make a diagonal line. We'll start here, then go to the center, hold your pen in place again, and let's go for something like this. And then you can drag in the color by dragging in that circle into your shape, and then it's filled. Now you can easily move and transform your house by going to the Move tool, that's the little arrow up here. And make sure that you have snapping turned on here in the snapping menu, because that way you'll know when your house is in the center line. I'll make the house a little bit bigger and then make sure it's centered again. And I'll place it about here and then just click the arrow to get out of the menu again. Now I want to add the roof to our house. Let's make a new layer to do that. So go to the layer menu and then click the plus for a new layer and turn on symmetry on this layer. You can do that by clicking the layer and then turning on Drawing Assist. You can see that the layer is assisted now. We're going to use a new brush from the Treasure Chest brush pack. That's a line brush. We are going to use this color, that fifth color in the first row. We'll set the opacity of the brush at 100% and we'll set the size at 20%. Now I'll start a bit to the left and a bit lower around here. Then hold your pen in place to make it snap to a quick shape. And make sure that these lines touch near that center line. That's great. Now we'll make a new layer by clicking the plus again and we'll drag it underneath the other layers. And we are going to turn on Drawing Assist again so symmetry is turned on. And for the color, we are going to use the first color in the first row. We are going to start about here and make a diagonal line towards the house. And then fill it here. Looking good. Now we're going to make a new layer on top of the blue house layer. So first click layer 1, then click the plus, then click the layer and turn on drawing assist. For the color, we are going to use the 6th color in the first row. And we are going to make the brush a bit smaller. We'll set it to 10%. Now let's make a vertical line starting about here. Then drag it down and hold one finger on your screen to make sure that it's a perfectly vertical line. Then just click the brush again. And now we can add some texture to our house. Let's start with the blue part. Let's click layer 1. We are going to turn off drawing assist, so click it, turn off drawing assist, then click it again and turn on alpha lock. Now when we start painting on this layer, whatever we paint, it'll only show up on that blue shape. We are going to the industrial brushes and we are going to use the Corrugated Iron. That's a pretty hard word to pronounce. Let's grab this 3rd color over here and let's check the opacity. It's set to 65% and the size is at 10%. And now we are going to glaze over the shape to add like these boards. These look like planks a bit. I used very little pressure on my pen to keep it subtle. Now we're going back to the brushes and use the concrete block brush. The opacity of the brush is at 100% and let's set the size to 25%. And let's add some more texture. Just a little bit. Glaze it over. You don't have to cover everything. And now we are going to grab another color. We'll grab this darker blue, that 4th color in the first row. And we'll make the brush a bit smaller. Let's say 10%. And we'll add a little shadow here. Just underneath the roof. Because it'll cast a shadow on the house. It'll block the sunlight. So it'll need a little bit of shadow. We'll want a little bit of shadow on these white sides as well. So let's go to that layer, layer 4. Let's click it and turn on alpha lock. And for the color, let's pick this color over here. That's the 8th color in the first row. And let's add a little bit of shadow there. And since we have symmetry turned on, it'll end up on both sides. Now I want to add an extra touch to the roof. So let's go to layer 2. To be sure, let's turn on alpha lock so we won't be able to draw or paint outside of the shape. And for the brush, we are going to use a treasure chest brush. We are going to use the chalk pencil. And for the color, let's use this color over here. That's the 7th color in the color palette. The brush opacity is at 100% and let's set the size to 20%. And now let's make a diagonal line starting here and then going up to the center and make them touch. This just gives a small extra touch, a bit more interest to our house, to our roof. Now we actually won't be using the symmetry tool anymore. We can turn it off. We can turn off that vertical line by going to the wrench, then to canvas, and then turn off the drawing guide. But when you go to the layers, you can actually see that these are still assisted. So symmetry is actually still turned on there, but we won't be working on these layers anymore, so it doesn't really matter. Now let's add some windows to our house. Let's create a new layer. Let's click the plus and let's make a selection. We'll go to the S shape ribbon, set it to rectangle, and I have color fill turned on. Let's grab a color. Let's pick this one. That's the 6th color in the first row. And now let's make a selection about here. Make it about this big. Now I want to make sure that it's centered, so we'll go to the arrow tool up here, the move tool. And since we have snapping turned on, we can see that vertical orange line, and that'll tell us that it's centered. I'll place it about here and then just click the arrow tool again. Now we are going to add the glass to our window. We'll make another layer on top by clicking the plus. Again, we'll use the selection tool, but we'll grab another color. Let's pick this one. That's the 8th color in the color palette. And now let's make a selection on top like this. And of course, you can use the move tool again, the little arrow tool, to make sure that it's centered. And then click the arrow again. Now we are going to use the eraser, and I want to set it to the Monoline Brush. Now we're going to make a vertical line in the center of our window. Hold your pen in place and then tap one finger on the screen to make sure that it's a perfectly vertical line. So you can use the eraser the same way you can use the brush. Then let's make a horizontal line here. Hold the pen in place and then tap one finger on the screen. And then do the same thing over here. Now let's create another window. Let's create a new layer by clicking the plus, and let's go through the same process. We'll make a selection first. Let's pick this color again. And then we'll make a rectangle. And it'll be slightly different than the one we made before. Something like this. Then we are going to make another selection on top, but first we'll need to make a new layer. So go to the layer menu, click the plus for a new layer. Let's pick that other color, that 8 color. And we'll grab the selection tool again and make a selection on top. Like this. And now we can use the move tool to make sure that it's centered in our window. You can see these blue lines. Then click the move tool again. And now let's use the eraser again. Start with a vertical line through the center, hold your pen in place, tap one finger on the screen, and then create the horizontal lines. Again, hold the pen in place, tap one finger on the screen. Now I want to duplicate this window. Let's go and group these two. We'll select them both by sliding to the right, then click group. Close the group, then slide to the left, click duplicate, and then go to the move tool. And let's move it to the right and leave a little bit of space between these two windows. Now we are going to select both of these groups. So slide to the right on the other group, then go to the move tool again. And now we can make sure that we have it centered in our house and in our canvas. Now we are going to add some texture to our windows. Let's start with the top window. Let's go to layer 5. Let's turn on alpha lock so we won't be able to paint outside of the shape. And for our brush, let's go back to those industrial brushes and use the concrete block brush. Now let's use the same color and gently glaze over the window to give a little bit of extra texture. And we'll do the same for these windows. So first click this one, turn on alpha lock, glaze over the window, and then do the same for the top group. Again, click layer 7, turn on alpha lock, and then glaze over the window for extra texture. Now let's go to the glass layers. First, layer 6. Let's turn on alpha lock here as well, and let's go to the selection tool. We are going to pick this color over here, that final color in the first row, and we'll make a selection of the bottom part here. Now it's as if there is a curtain in front of the window. And let's do the same on these layers. First this one, turn on alpha lock, make a selection of the bottom part. We'll go a little bit higher this time. And let's do the same for this layer 8. Click it, turn on alpha lock, then go to the selection tool and select that bottom part. And then click the selection tool again to get out of the menu. Now, if you are happy with your house, you can either group all of these layers or you can just merge them all. So you'll just have one layer with your house on it. Just be careful because once you merge them, you can't go back and you won't be able to make changes, move the windows around, stuff like that. So if you want to be able to make changes later on, then I would advise you to just group the layers or just only merge the layers with the windows, for example. Choose wisely. Now let's start working on the background and the foreground actually. Let's click the plus for a new layer and drag it underneath our house. We are going to make a selection again, but this time we are going to use this color over here. It's the bottom row and it's the 8 color. We'll use the selection tool again. Let's zoom out just a little bit. We'll start here at the bottom, then drag up until we are a little bit below the top of the roof, a little bit above our window, about here. and then click the S shape ribbon again. Now this will be our water layer, and in front of our house we will start making the grass and flowers. So we'll need a layer on top of the house, so click the house layer first and then click the plus for a new layer. And let's go and grab the round chalk brush, which is part of the treasure chest brush pack, but you can actually use another brush as well. It doesn't really matter in this part. Let's use this color over here, the second one in the second row. I have the brush at 100% opacity and 100% size. And now let's start about here and cover that lower area of our canvas. We'll make a bit of a diagonal line here, covering that house, and then we'll go up here, again covering a part of the house. So we get kind of like a V shape here. And then you can just cover everything here. You can just fill it, coloring it in by hand until everything is green over here. And now we'll continue working on this layer, but we'll pick a different brush. We'll go to the organic brushes and we will use the swordgrass brush. Let's set it to the darker color, the first color in the second row. Let's set the opacity to 100% and the size is at 10%. And now let's add some grassy details. Let's go over this area in the back, just along the edge, giving it a grassy texture. Now as we move to the front, we can make the brush a little bit bigger. Let's go for 16% for example, and let's lower the opacity a bit. Let's go for 60%, and let's go over this area as well. And I'm following a bit like that V shape, making it a little bit rounded, a curvy shape. And now we can switch to the lighter color. We can switch back to that second green. And we can make the opacity even lower. Let's go for 30%. And let's glaze over this area again, following that hilly shape, that V shape. Covering this area and making the grass lighter as you go towards, well, the viewer. As you move closer to the bottom of your canvas. So now we actually have a very subtle gradient from lighter green to darker green. And now let's add some extra touches. Let's go and use the reed brush, which is also part of the organic brushes. And let's go and grab that darker green again, that first color in the second row. And the opacity of this brush is at 100%, and let's set the size to 5%. And now let's draw some grass in by hand. Just for some extra variety, you can also add some of these buds as if these are flowers that are about to bloom. And this just gives a nice variety to your grass texture. Making some a bit longer, some shorter, just make a nice variety here. Now let's also work on some flowers. Let's make a new layer for that. Let's click the plus and then go and grab this color over here. That's the 6th color. And let's create the suggestion of some flowers here by just making these little dabs. Vary the size and the shape a little bit. Just go all over and make them nice and small near the house because it's further away from the viewer, so they will appear to be smaller. It takes a little while, but it'll look awesome once it's finished. So go all the way to the right. And make sure that you keep varying them up so it doesn't become like a repeated pattern. You can make some small groups of flowers together. And you can start making the brush a little bit bigger. Let's go for 15%. You can start making some bigger flowers as you move towards the foreground. So that's closer to the bottom of your canvas. And with this brush, as you push harder, you get a bigger stroke. In case you are using a pen that has pressure sensitivity, of course, like the Apple Pencil. Otherwise, you can play around with the size of your brush. Let's make some bigger ones over here. Just go bigger and bigger as you move down. Now, the house in this case, it is in focus. It is fully sharp, crisp. We are able to see the details, and to get like a bit of a photorealistic look, we'll want to make the foreground blurry, but everything that is close to the house, it'll be a bit more crisp, because that is the focal area. So we'll want that grass and also those flowers near the house. We want those to be crisp, but the other ones, they should become blurry. Now, a way to do that is by going to the magic wand and then using Gaussian blur and set it to pencil. Now we can go and grab an airbrush. Let's go and use the soft brush. And I have the opacity of this brush set to 60%. And let's set the size to 15% if I can see it. Yeah, there we have it. And now let's go over the flowers that are at the bottom. But let's leave the other ones in focus. The ones that are near the house. You can make multiple strokes on top of the ones in front to make them even more blurry. And then you can use your finger and slide on the screen. And let's set it to around 45%. Then just click the magic wand again to get out of the menu, and let's make another layer of flowers. Let's click the plus for a new layer. And let's also start using this color. That's the 7th color in the second row. And let's switch back to the reed brush, which you can find under organic. And let's start making bigger flowers. Let's make the brush bigger. Let's go for 40%. And just make some random shapes. Of course, they should be a bit rounded. A bit like ovals. They will be covering this area. And vary the size a bit. And let's also vary the color. Let's also use this color, the 8th color, in the color palette. Now let's just put some bigger flowers here in the foreground. Well, they're not actually bigger, but they appear to be bigger since they are close to the viewer, of course. And just vary it up. We can also use this color again, the 6th color in the second row. Make some nice big blobs here in the foreground. And perhaps some smaller ones. And let's also draw in some extra grass. Let's use this color for that, the 3rd color in the second row. And let's just make some bigger blobs of grass. We are going to blur this, so don't worry too much about how they look. But it is going to give some nice color variation here. Some blobs over here. And once you got this, you can use the Gaussian blur again. Let's just blur the entire layer. We can go to the magic wand and pick Gaussian blur, set it to layer, and slide to the right. Let's go for around 10%. I'm at 10.2% right now, and then click the magic wand again. And you can slowly build these layers up like this. You can make another layer and make even more flowers. Let's click the plus for a new layer. let's go and grab this color again, the 6th color. And I want some flowers here, some more medium-sized. And you can fill some gaps, some areas where you feel like you need some more flowers. And now let's switch to the 4th color over here in the 2nd row for some more dandelions. These have already bloomed. They are ready to get blown in the wind. We're just making some round shapes. One over here. Let's make a round shape here. And over here. Make it pretty big. Now let's go ahead and blur again. Let's go to the magic wand, use Gaussian blur, and let's set it to pencil again. First, make sure that you set it to the soft brush under airbrushing. And let's blur these dandelions. I'm making rounded motions on top of them. Yeah, I don't want to blur these too much. So using the pencil option gives you more control when blurring. You can decide what areas you want to blur the most. Now these dandelions just need some cores. Let's make a new layer by clicking the plus and let's grab this color over here, the 5th color in the color palette. Let's make sure that we go back to the reed brush and then go over the centers, the cores of these dandelions. Let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's go for 15%. And you can also give them a little stem. Make a little line going down. And then you can go and use the Gaussian blur again. I'm going to set it to layer this time. Drag your pen to the right. And go for something like this. I'm at 7.1% and then just click the magic wand again. I feel like we can use a few more big flowers in the foreground. Let's click the plus for a new layer. Let's go and grab this color again, the 6th color. And we'll still be using the reed brush. We'll make the brush a bit bigger, 30%. And let's just make big shapes here in the foreground to be able to create some big blurry flowers. And you can really slowly build the whole effect up this way. So we have a couple of more flowers and then you can just go and use the magic wand again, click Gaussian blur, set it to layer, drag your pen to the right and blur it like this. Let's go for 12% and then click the magic wand again. Now that we have these flowers, let's move to our background and let's work on the water. Let's go to layer 2 and let's blur it just slightly. Let's go to the magic wand, use Gaussian blur, set it to layer, and then drag the pen to the right just slightly and set it to 2%. And then click the magic wand again. Now let's go and add some texture to this layer. Let's go to the layer and turn on alpha lock so we will only be able to paint on this gray and not outside of it. Now let's go to the elements brushes and use the oceans brush. Then let's go ahead and use this color over here. That's the last color in the 3rd row. The opacity of the brush is at 60% and the size is at 11%. And now let's make horizontal strokes over the water. You can focus on one side at a time or go all the way from the left to the right. Just add some nice wavy texture by just using these horizontal strokes. Don't accidentally change the brush size like I'm doing. So horizontal strokes only, You can also add some darker color. Let's use this one, for instance, the last one in the first row, and add some darker touches. Just a few horizontal strokes for some variety in our water. I think this is looking good. We are going to blur this layer again. We will go to the magic wand and use the motion blur. Set it to layer. And now you can slide your pen to the right, and the direction of your pen will decide the direction of the blur. And we just want a horizontal blur. So don't go like this, just a horizontal blur. And let's go for something like 35, between 30 and 35%. Something like this. And then just click the magic wand again to get out of that menu. Now it's time to add some mountains. We are going to do that on a layer underneath this water layer. So first click the plus for a new layer and then drag it underneath the water layer. Let's go back and use the reed brush under organic. And let's first use this fourth color in the third row. Let's make a wobbly line. We'll start about here. And we'll wobble our way up here. Then go down a little bit. Make a nice wobbly line. We'll go down here and then back up. Wobble, wobble all the way to the right. And then you can drag in the color underneath to fill the shape. You might need to adjust the color drop threshold so you don't get a thin white line. I think this is looking good. Let's make another layer on top. So let's click the plus. Then we'll go to the next color. That's the fifth color in the third row. And we'll make another wobbly line. Let's start here this time. Go up. And just wobble your way to the right. Then we'll wobble down again. Make some final wobbles till you're all the way to the right. And then you can fill the shape again. Then time for another one. Let's click the plus for a new layer. Go to the next color. That's the sixth color in this row. And let's make another wobbly line. Let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's go for 10%. And then let's wobble down here. Up a little bit. And then go down all the way to the right. And drag in the color to fill it. Now let's add some texture to these mountains. Let's start with layer 9. Let's click the layer, turn on alpha lock, so we will only be able to paint on the shape, not outside of it. Let's go to the artistic brushes and use the hearts brush. And we will use the fifth color in the third row. The brush opacity is at 100% and the size is at 18%. And now let's just make some vertical strokes, adding a slight texture to these mountains. Very subtle, using very little pressure. And let's do the same for layer 10. Again, turn on alpha lock, don't forget. And for the color, let's use the next one. So that's the sixth color. And again, we'll make some vertical strokes, adding a slight texture. Using very little pressure. You can leave some gaps in between. Now finally, for layer 11, again, click it, turn on alpha lock. Let's go to the next color. That's the seventh color over here. And let's add some texture here as well. Now finally, we will be needing some clouds in our sky for a nice moody vibe. Let's create a layer underneath our mountains. So first click the plus and then drag that layer underneath the others. And for our brush, we are going to use a brush in the treasure chest brush pack. We are going to use the clouds brush. Then let's go to the colors. Let's use this color first, the second one, and the third row. The brush opacity is at 100% and the size is at 30%. And let's go over the top area, but leave the lower 1/3 of the sky. Let's leave that open. So we'll just go over the top area, adding these clouds. Then we'll move to the darker color. That's the third color in the third row. And then let's just color the top 1/3. So we'll move up a little bit and we'll just add some clouds there. And once you have done that, you can blur the clouds just slightly. Let's go to the magic wand, use Gaussian blur, set it to layer, drag your pen to the right, and let's just give it a 2.5% blur. And then click the magic wand again. And that's it. Did you notice anything changing during the video? Let me know in the comments so I can check if you were paying attention. But of course, you can also use the comment section to let me know what you thought of this tutorial. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time for the next You Can Draw This video tutorial. Thank you for watching.